Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Brent Dieterding. He is the CISO over at AFNI. Welcome, Brent.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for coming here, Brent. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career thus far?
Yeah, sure. My name is Brent Dieterding. I'm a little bit unique among CISOs in a couple different ways. One of which is that I was on the vendor side for 19 years. So I was in operations for 15. I did tons and tons of hiring and mentoring and development and training and all that kind of stuff. And then I was on like a global sales overlay role for a couple of years. So I've carried a quota. That's a little bit weird. And I went from like evil sales guy on Friday to like trusted thought leader on Monday. It was a little bit odd. I'm also a little bit unique in that I love what I do. Like I'm pretty joyful. And that is a little bit unique among CISOs. The stress is not a burden to me, and my satisfaction is through the roof. So a couple of things made me a little bit unique amongst CISOs, and I enjoy that. It's cool.
Well, yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, I think I heard a statistic recently that something like 75% of CISOs are unhappy currently in their role. What do you attribute your happiness and satisfaction to?
Yeah. So when I decided that I wanted to try to become a CISO, a lot of people who liked me and loved me and cared about me tried to convince me not to do it. Right? Because they don't want to see someone that they care about in pain. And 72% turn to drugs or alcohol, and you get all the memes and all that stuff. I'm like, whatever. And I was right. Like maybe that is the case for a lot of people. I am very happy. So think about airline pilots or paramedics or firefighters or whatever. They are put into incredibly stressful situations that for them, they are wired such that the stress is not a burden to them, right? You don't see airline pilots every time they fly, like getting off the plane shaking and not being able to deal with things, right? And you go to webinars, and mental health is I'm not denigrating by any means, right? Not denigrating at all. But I think it's also probably uncommon for, say, CFOs to have webinars where they're talking about what apps they have on their phone to meditate in the bathroom every day, right? So I see this disparity. I mean, any executive has stress, right? The difference is whether the stress is a burden or not. One thing that I view is very important in life, and I did this for years in the operations center. When you're dealing with an operations center and you're managing environments for thousands of firewalls, hundreds of environments, whatever, you will inherently talk to people who are having the worst day of their year, or if not their career. And you've got to not internalize that. Client services people have learned the same thing. Salespeople have learned the same thing. Anyone in a service industry has figured out that it's maybe not you, it's them, right? And what they have learned from experience, and what I have learned, is the ability to say, I control this, I don't control this. I'm not going to encounter stress and anxiety over things that I do not control. So that's very much what I do. The likelihood of some jackass in China ruining my year is zero. That's not going to happen. Now, all the things that I do control, like, okay, right? But I take care of stuff that I can control. So as a result, I don't have anything in my life, very little things, that are urgent. I have plenty of things that are important, right? But generally speaking, I don't deal with fires. I don't deal with fires that I've got to do right now. And that enables me to not be burdened by the inherent stress of the role, right? And also, quite honestly, I'm just a fairly positive, energetic person, and tend to have a very sober, realistic view of situations and an unrealistic, almost arrogant view of my own abilities. So I end up looking at things and saying, like, this is gonna suck, but it'll be okay. It'll work out, right? And whether that is a workout or an incident or a parenting situation or whatever, like, just the fundamental belief, like, it's gonna work out somehow. And Do I fail? Yeah, I fail. That's fine. But if a situation is going to suck, then I may as well get as much value as I can out of it. So I just I showed my 11-year-old son about an hour ago. I saw a post on LinkedIn of Ed Sheeran, the musician, right? And he played like one of his very first songs. It was terrible. It was so bad. And he did that. And I saw a similar video a couple weeks ago where like Tom Brady didn't make the football team when he first went out. And you're like, what the heck? Well, so anyone who has had any level of success, they failed a whole lot in their career, which actually, and I'll mention it later, I'm sure, but which is why a fundamental characteristic that I value highly, actually the 3 characteristics that I value extremely highly are grit, coachability, and resilience, right? And that's what I do personally. That's what I give to my sons. That's what I give to my teammates. Those are the expectations that I think create success in life. So kind of a tangent a little bit there, but there you go.
No, that's great. Well, and the fact that you would say that you're imparting those values to your sons leads me to believe that you think some of that can be taught.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
How much do you think can be taught versus just is innate personality characteristic?
Oh, every bit of it, or almost all of it, right? This is a trainable skill, right? No one, I helped lead our youth group at church for 7th and 8th graders, and I had one of the kids in the group say something like, their parents don't understand or we're dismissive of something. I was like, what? This isn't really a big deal. And I was like, okay, granted. But let me give you a perspective on something. I've had an argument, or I've had a discussion with my son, who was 4 at the time, who was crying big crocodile tears and was undeniably in significant emotional distress about wiping their own butt. So, like, their feelings were 100% valid. They were in severe emotional distress right then, but a little bit of perspective on life is that wiping your butt is not a life-changing event, right? So perspective helps. So yes, valid feelings, but perspective helps as well. And when you start there with like wiping your butt is a major life event, right? Like eventually that is not. So you've always got to have a little bit of a longer term perspective on things. Like, is this a big deal or a little deal for a 4-year-old? But I do the same thing to myself. Like, is this a big deal or a little deal in the sphere of my life, in the sphere of what is important, right? And I also take it like perspective is valuable because, like, all right, so what's the worst that's going to happen? I get fired. Is that really going to happen? No. It's that for a given thing, I'm not going to get fired. And if I do, that unbelievably worst case scenario, I'll be okay. It'll work out. I'll figure it out somehow, right? And it just, that's an inherent belief. So yes, I believe that grit, coachability, resilience absolutely are trainable skills. And I use the word trainable, not teachable, because trainable, like training, is done for a goal, right? And takes work over time, right? So trainable skills. So it doesn't happen one time. It's not like, oh, here's knowledge, and now you know this. Now you're gritty. Nah. It is a million decisions all the time. And it starts with things like, making your bed in the morning, to going to workouts, to showing it to work, to doing stuff that you don't want to do, to whatever the case may be, right? So that all of these things are absolutely trainable skills.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially you're continually practicing, you're iterating. It's, continuous improvement, which isn't necessarily sexy, but it's necessary, I think, for most things in life. And yeah, I think there's an element though that personality plays into that. Like I do a fair amount of I guess I have a fair interest in human psychology, and say that it's kind of a soft science. But according to the Big Five personality trait model, I'm like really high in trait neuroticism. So if there's something that goes wrong, my first instinct is the world is on fire, it's falling apart, and I have to work really, really hard to overcome that sense of impending doom. Where some people are wired a little bit differently. But yeah, I agree that in the end, there's certain things that you can do just by doing them and taking that first step and iterating on them, over time.
Yeah. I'm going to mess up who this was attributed to. I initially read it in a book about the Marine Corps, I think, but it was someone went to a like professional PGA golfer and was like, "Man, I wish I could hit the golf ball like that." And he's like, "No, you don't. No, you don't. Because do you know what was required to get to this point? Do you know how many hours I spent doing this? The blood hands and all that. Like, if you wanted to, you could, but you didn't put it in the work, right? So putting in the work makes a difference. I figured out, and this is rough terms, right? But given the amount of hours that I've worked, and I work a reasonable amount now, but I didn't at first, right? I'll put probably 100,000 hours into my career. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time being very intentional about a whole lot of things. Now, did I waste a lot of time? Waste? Yes, absolutely, right? And what that enables me to do is it enables me to short circuit things for other people. I had the second most technical guy I ever worked with. Didn't even have his associate's degree from college, worked for us as an intern, sat next to me and was just a freaking rock star. He was awesome. And I was able, I remember exactly. I taught him something in 20 minutes that he then internalized, got, and just had. They took me a solid 9 months of late nights and hard work. And I was like, this is awesome. This is fantastic. And I have, I've promoted people and I've gotten people and I'm like, you make more now than I made after 15 years in the industry. This is fantastic. This is great. I love being able to do that. And my kids, if they listen to me just a little bit, then they'll be good to go, right? And maybe they will now, maybe they will later, whatever. But even with my kids, I'm not interested in raising good kids. I'm dramatically interested in raising good adults. And however they are bent, right? Like my oldest and my youngest are very, very different people, right? They're bent different ways. But grit, coachability, and resilience applies no matter what you want to do. Like my 11-year-old cracks me up. He has 2 career tracks that he's interested in. He wants to either be a CISO or a landscaper. And I'm like, okay, both of which are great and fine. I might recommend landscaping as a cleaner path, especially if you own your own business and all that. I was like, yeah, we'll see. But grit, coachability, and resilience apply to no matter what you want to do, right? So it's like, however you're bent is fine, and to some degree, you can choose your profession based on how you're bent and what you deal with better. But grit, coachability, and resilience are going to apply no matter what, right?
Yeah, so I would guess that those traits or those talents that are developed, you would say are probably pretty inherent to a successful career in security. How do you identify those sorts of traits when you're looking to hire somebody? And how do you, how do you evaluate what's an acceptable baseline and what's just going to be too much work to get somebody to where they need to be?
Yeah. So, I have interviewed hundreds of people over the years for entry-level cybersecurity careers and jobs. And I've pulled people from outside cyber. I like to say hire your plumber. Like a buddy of mine is a pipe fitter, and he would be rock star in cybersecurity. He doesn't have any interest in it, but he would be fantastic. And you can smell it. It is a kind of a cop-out way of saying, but you can smell it, but there are indications. So, for example, I love talking to athletes especially if they're performed at a high level in high school or college, because if you have gotten to the point of being a collegiate athlete, then you probably exemplify grit, coachability, and resilience in many ways. So collegiate athletes are great. Honestly, if I were to talk to someone who is clearly very fit and strong, I say, like, I want to hire anyone who can do a double body weight back squat, because I know what's required to get there, and you learn a lot under that bar. So that's a good indication. I always used to ask people what their home lab was like. That doesn't apply as much anymore quite, but I like seeing passion, right? So passion for learning. Or I like asking, what is an opinion that you hold that is counter to conventional wisdom? Like, conventional wisdom says, layer up when it's cold. Why? Do you disagree with that? Why? Well, I happen to, but I have reasons, right? So something that outside of cyber, like a strong opinion that you hold that disagrees with everyone else. I like that. I like that kind of stuff, right? That gets to kind of the resilience, or a sports team, or coaching, or teaching someone something, right? So I find that these things aren't like, come out like, tell me how you're gritty in an interview, or tell me how you're coachable, right? It's weird, right? But I find that it comes up in conversation naturally. And so I did a lot of interviews like, hey, let's go get lunch, and did that, right? Because I can cram knowledge into heads. Cramming knowledge into heads is not a problem. For anyone who's reasonably intelligent, this is not a problem. Now, let me clarify a little bit here. I also worked when I did almost all the hiring I've done, I worked in operation centers, right, for a vendor. So that was the best incubator for security talent in the world, right, or one of the best in the world, right? And what happens is we just cranked out badasses. It was osmosis. You just put people in that environment where the expectation was high and everyone was learning in some form or fashion, and you had this immense lab of inputs and clients and all this. So you learned how to talk to clients, you learned the technical security stuff. We had massive amounts of formal and informal resources around, and it was just fantastic. And so the biggest deal was not knowledge. The biggest deal was culture, right? So if we establish a good positive culture, then we just crank people out. And I've seen people go from, very, very little technical knowledge to pen testers, to sellers, to developers, to threat researchers, to project managers, to just flat out leaders, to CISOs, to every possible thing that you can think of. And I saw those come in from, masters in electrical engineering, or masters in cybersecurity, or MBAs, or welders, or truckers, or retail managers, or chefs, or whatever else. I know people in each of those things that I just listed, right? And the characteristic that they all shared was fundamentally grit, coachability, and resilience. Now, I can say that now. Now, when I was interviewing people, I didn't articulate it that way. I get to do that now, right? But at the time, it boiled down to, I can smell someone who has a willingness and a desire to learn, has some perseverance to doing it, and has learned some stuff. Now, I'm 44, so I had an 8-bit Nintendo, right? That's actually one indication of grit. Like, if I can ask you, like, oh, hey, play Nintendo or whatever else, and you didn't, well, come on, we didn't have saves. We didn't have save games. So you had to grind with your 3 lives or whatever, or even if you cheated, a little bit more like Konami code kind of thing, right? But you had to grind to get there. There wasn't cheat codes, there weren't saves, there weren't all this. So that's one minor little thing, right? Or even, like, I've not done a ton of analysis about generational differences. I tend to think that grit, coachability, resilience can apply to a lot of different generations. But like one thing that I noticed is I grew up without a cell phone. I grew up without the internet, all that. And that enabled, I think that made it easier for me to be gritty on some things because like you had to kind of figure it out, right? There wasn't an immediate answer to knowledge or cheating at a game or whatever else, right? So had to kind of work through some stuff. So I feel like you can smell it, and I feel like it comes up in conversation rather than formal questions.
Yeah, and I would imagine patience factors into that as well. When you were fussing with the Nintendo cartridge and having to blow in it and hit the TV and mess with the dial and all that, you have to have enough patience to actually turn the thing on and get it to work.
And that turns into a troubleshooting skill, right? Like figuring out how something works, a desire to learn, a desire to figure out how something works, right? The analogy I always use is that of a car. You say, I can teach a whole lot of people how to drive a car. But if you understand how a transmission works, you're going to be a better driver, right? Now, you don't have to be you don't have to disassemble it and all that kind of stuff. But you have to understand like the concept of gearing, for example. And different gears do different things and torque and all that stuff. Real basic stuff, right? So when I train people and when I mentor people, I always like to ask questions, but like, tell me how this works. And that is a good interview question. Like, take a given thing, right? That's outside cyber, even like something you're passionate about. Oh, I'm really passionate about four-wheeling or hunting or whatever. I don't care, right? Oh, cooking. I don't know anything about cooking. Like, so does it make a difference what pan you use? Why? Oh, okay, cool. I want to hear someone explain that. I want to hear someone explain that they have thought about why something works, why something is that way, because I know that in security that's going to be helpful. And I know that as they ramp up, as they proceed through their career, knowing how something ties together into a bigger plan is very, very important. As a CISO, I now understand that we don't do work without making progress on reducing risk, right? So I want people to be able to tie back everything that they do, everything that they spend their time on how that is mitigating material risk or how that is enabling the business or why the hell are we doing this, right? Why are we doing this? And that's important. Now, if I can ask someone about their choice of skillet to make an omelet, okay. I mean, it's all getting at it fundamentally the same thing, like understanding, and that also applies to when their attention to detail, but also their coachability. Like, how much am I going to be able to ask them something and then give them something in return? How open to that are they going to be, right? So that's another minor indication. I never thought about the applicability of souffle pans to cybersecurity, but there you go.
No, that's great. Yeah. How do you ensure that that interest in that hobby, whatever it may be, say it's cooking, how do you ensure that that's actually going to translate to an intellectual curiosity in security? Like, does it always transfer, do you think? Or is it possible that they has an interest in that, but not security?
So really what I care about is I care about the and it doesn't have to be that specific thing, right? It can be whatever. Like, what are you passionate about? Now, here's the trick. You don't actually have to be passionate about security. You may just want the job because it's a job and that's your compartment in life and that's what you want. Okay. I care that you as a fundamental person have the ability to be intellectually curious, have the ability to be gritty, have the ability to be resilient, have the ability to be coachable. Now, that doesn't mean an immense amount of work. It doesn't mean that, oh my gosh, all I care about is security. That's what I live and breathe. Okay, I don't care, right? I care that you have that ability and that you can bring that ability to be someone I want to work with, right? So it's not only, it's I think Simon Sinek is the guy who talks about performance and trust, right? And so he talks about the Navy SEALs, right? And there's the way that they articulate this is they go, high performance people are people that you would trust with your life, right? High trust people are people that you would trust with your money and your wife, right? So, and the CEOs are willing to take, again, their frame of reference is on the very high end, but they're willing to take moderate performers that are very high trust individuals, right? I kind of like that too. Like I've interviewed people who their previous experience was Geek Squad at Best Buy. And this was a cybersecurity job. And I said, screw all that. Like, we can put knowledge in heads. That's not a problem. I wouldn't work with that guy in 10 years. Like, flat out, I wouldn't work with that guy in 10 years. And that did it. Like, that's enough for me, right? If I want to work with you, because whether you are passionate about security or not, but you have the ability to be someone I want to work with, that's great. And I found people that I want to work with, people who would be good at cybersecurity in all different walks of life, every different socioeconomic, gender, race thing. That doesn't matter, right? So I can point back to a lot of people that believe a lot differently than I am, that look a lot different, that think a lot different, that all that, but are just, they're the right people. I mean, they're the right people for the job. And it isn't even necessarily that they can articulate it. Like, one of the aspects of being a good interviewer is being able to pull things out. Like, example, I mentioned that second most technical guy I know. He's fantastic. He didn't include it. He didn't mention it in his interview resume. I didn't interview him, actually. Someone else did. But he ran a top 10 World of Warcraft guild back in the day. When I found that out, I was like, that makes complete sense. Like, total sense. I was like, did you mention that? And he's like, no. I'm like, you absolutely should have. He reverse engineered all the stuff to figure out what algorithms beat what bosses and all that kind of stuff. And he led, 15, 30, whatever, hormonal teenagers towards a common goal without video online. And I was like, that's fantastic. That's project management. That's leadership. That's a crazy attention to detail. That's crazy amounts of grit. Come on, man. That is gold, right? Had I stumbled upon that in an interview, I would be like, oh, I'm hiring this guy in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, I'm hiring him without even knowing anything about his technical ability, right? Based on that one thing, right? So there's a lot of aspects, I think, that can kind of tip you off. And he didn't know to articulate that. So a talented interviewer, I think, can pull those things out of people and recognize what they want. Now, and unfortunately, poor interviewers are going to be like, "Oh, do you have 3 years of experience coding in Python?" I'm sorry, there's a lot of those out there, right? I mean, at every level. So I can't fix that. Yeah, I'm trying to, but I can't fix it by myself.
That seems to me to be the default. Has somebody held this job title before, or have they, had X, Y, and Z number of years of experience in Python, like you said, or whatever it may be for the role at hand. So I think we have a giant lack of hiring for potential and imagination. It's, most people want to take some sort of step up in their career when they're making a career change. And so if you're offering them the same exact job that they've already been doing and they are intellectually curious and want a challenge, that's going to be boring to them. And it's not going to be a compelling reason to switch jobs. And you see the same companies fighting over the same candidates. It's just a giant poach fest. And we don't have enough people willing to consider the folks that aren't traditionally, a fit on paper. Now, you said something that I found interesting. It's like if somebody has those traits, they're going to be a fit, or, you think they're a good fit for security. By extension, there's also a set of people that do not have those traits and maybe aren't a fit for security.
You can smell them too.
So we have tens of thousands of people trying to break into the industry right now. What do we do with the folks that aren't a fit for the field, and how do we separate the wheat from the chaff, I guess.
Yeah. Boy, I wish I had a great answer. I don't have a fantastic answer. I don't have a solution for the industry. I have a solution for individual people. I ran across. This was not one I was personally involved in, but a friend of mine was, and we had someone in the operations center many years ago who was really, really good. I don't even know who this guy was. I don't remember his name, but he was really good. He was a really good performer. And then all of a sudden, he just started falling off a cliff, right? And got upset at a client. I mean, something like that, right? And we pulled him in and was like, "What's going on?" And he was like, "Oh, it's just not fair." And it's like, "Oh, there it is. We are a services business. If you need fairness in your soul, if you need stuff to be fair, you should not be in services, right? This is not a fit for you. So we're going to let you go, and we're going to let you go find somewhere where you can be a good fit, right?" And I think that that's a conversation that sometimes needs to be had. And quite honestly, I see it at all different levels, right? I see CISOs who are really burned out, really depressed, really have lots and lots of issues. And I'm like, go do something else. Go do something where you can be healthy and happy. This is not a fit. And I've seen it with salespeople too, right? Salespeople are generally coin-operated machines. Money's the thing. Money's the thing for all of us, but money's the special thing for salespeople. But if you're selling something that you don't believe in, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You need to go do something else. And that's part of a level of honesty that we all need to have with ourselves. Is this working, or is this not working for me? And why is that? And so that's, and sometimes as leaders, we have to help people have that realization, right? And on an individual basis, I can't fix the industry, but on an individual basis, that happens. And where I think this comes in is for all of us, when people are initially investigating and say, I want to get into cyber, so you heard there was money here too, yeah? Okay. And they say things like, I want to be a hacker for the FBI. No, you don't. No, that's not a good idea, right? And they're like, oh, I do. And you're like, nah, I don't think you do. Let's talk about that, right? And you give them the ability to talk about why. Why do you want to be that? And that gets into this other thing that we all choose our profession to meet an emotional identity need, right? And we're tempted to say very altruistic things I really like protecting people. I really like serving people. Yeah, so do I. I mean, and that's evident throughout my life. Throughout my life, you can see that I spend a lot of time, energy, and money on serving and helping other people. That's what I do. But that's not why I chose the profession. I chose the profession because it met an emotional identity need. I like being a settler. Right? There's pioneer settlers and city planners. I like being a settler. I have a knack at this security thing. I like being a little bit different. I like being a little bit unique. And I'm kind of natural. It makes sense to me, and it tickles the need, right? And that changes over time. So I'm still in security. I'm a CISO, right? But guess what? I could go be a COO and be perfectly happy. Right, running operations for a manufacturing plant, that'd be fine. That would still meet my emotional needs, even though it might not be security or serving or whatever else. So I think that some self-awareness and honesty is very much needed. And I think that we as leaders in cybersecurity can try to help nudge people towards that self-awareness and towards that. I'm reminded of like my wife, for example, who was a college mathematics professor for 17 years. She says, I am a teacher. Okay, I'm down. Cool, great. Can you be a teacher outside the classroom? Yeah, absolutely. Is my financial advisor a teacher? Yeah, 100%, right? Is my friends who are college or grade school or high school teachers, are they teachers? Yes. So you can take that fundamental desire, your emotional identity need or whatever, and you can apply that in a whole lot of different ways in the industry, right? So you can be whatever, and maybe security isn't your jam, right? Maybe you should go be a landscaper and own a landscaping business. Maybe you should go do whatever, right? So I feel like cybersecurity, for whatever reason, has gotten this like sexy like image or aura. And I mean, cybersecurity is great for some people. And it's not for everyone, but for those someones, it's pretty awesome. I love it. I've been doing it 25 years. It's great. But it's not for everyone, right? I mentioned my pipe fitter buddy. Like, he'd be a rock star at it. Doesn't want to do it. Because he's self-aware. He's self-aware and goes, nah, I don't work in an office. Not me. Okay. I'm going to get his son. I think I'm going to get his son involved. But he has the desire for it. But that's why also I don't go evangelize like, oh, you should get into cyber. You should get into cyber. But when people come to me, the first thing I tell them is like, why? Are you sure? You sure you want to do that? And we talk about it. We talk about what their emotional identity need is. And we talk about their motivations and kind of strip away some stuff. And that conversation is necessary. Now, by the same token, I had, in fact, a few months ago, I had a guy. He's a firefighter, but he came and he was like, "Hey, is there like a certification I can get to do cybersecurity on the side?" And I was like, "No, nope." Like, just cut that conversation off, like right away. Like, no, he has no desire. It's just like, could I do this as a side gig? He's like, nah, no. If you want a career, we can talk, but no, this is not a side gig thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about motivators in somebody's why. When I do my career guidance calls with the entry-level folks, that's the first thing I ask is, why are you interested in security? That answer will tell me a lot. They say, I'm interested because, I grew up tinkering with computers since I was 12 and just always fascinated with the way things work. And, I have this home lab and I'm doing all these things and I'm volunteering at B-sides. I'm like, okay, that person's probably going to be a fit for the industry. Yeah. But then I talk to some people that are, they got their Security Plus, they got their degree or degrees, plural, and they're just kind of looking for a job and they don't have a good answer to that question.
Yeah.
Well, you're probably going to struggle. And you make a great point about transferable skills. It's like, yes, we think about transferable skills when hiring somebody, but also maybe when pushing people to a different career, they should think about transferable skills. If you dig down deep enough to somebody's motivators, what gets them up in the morning, there's something down there that once you discover it, that can apply to any number of things. But I think most people don't have that level of introspection. So it helps to have somebody else kind of.
Yeah, and I don't think I did when I was 20.
Right.
Like, honestly, I think I found something that, like, keep in mind, I got into, I had a security job. I came out of college in December of 2000, and my first job was, like, manager of security or something like that, right? Like, I came straight out doing straight security. I swear I was one of the first people to do that, right? Everyone else had been hired before. They were sysadmin, they were network guy, they were IT, they were whatever, and moved into security. I did security from the absolute get-go. And I don't think it was, so it's kind of weird. One, the body of knowledge of security in 1999 was like that big. So it was like being a doctor in 1700, right? I mean, it's like, oh, sure, okay. I mean, I was no joke an expert in like 4 or 5 different fields. And I picked one because I was like, this isn't going to work. Like, but the body of knowledge was that big. So like you could do that. Right. But I think my motivation back then was really that this was brand new. I had a real knack for it. Like it really was intensely interesting to me. And I had just tons of energy to apply to it. And that worked. Like passion and desire and intense curiosity really did me well. I had a couple of people at various points guide me into a very positive direction. I could have been the best malware writing bad guy ever, but I was guided appropriately at different points, and that was it. Like that did it, right? I mean, no one was doing it. I liked being a little bit different, a little bit unique. I was good at it. I really, really liked it, and hey, it happened to pay well too, which always worked out pretty well. I remember in 2003, I had a buddy of mine who also did cybersecurity. He's a volunteer paramedic. And I went on a run with him in the ambulance. And both my parents were in emergency medicine in some form or fashion. And I called my wife and I was like, hey, you should be really glad that I found cybersecurity before emergency medicine because I love this. Like, I would love doing emergency medicine. But guess what? Cybersecurity is kind of a better pay and better lifestyle than being a paramedic. And I'm not mad about it, but like I'd love to go do that. And that's another like transferable skill, right? Really understanding how the body works, being a little bit unique, having that black voodoo magic, right? The stuff that other people don't know how to do or don't get or think is a little bit mysterious. Like same thing. That would work fine. I'd also be a really good coroner, by the way, which is kind of a little bit unique. Like, as in retirement, I'm going to volunteer as a coroner's assistant because that does get to the serving people thing, and I'm wired that I think I could do that job and do it with empathy and grace, and very few people can. So that would be a cool way for me to serve people is being a coroner's assistant on a volunteer basis. Like serving people when they're having their worst day is something that I'm tend to be okay at. So I enjoy that if I can. But being a volunteer coroner's assistant doesn't pay nearly as well as being a CISO. I'll do that.
That's true. Yeah. What? I mean, obviously, there's some people talk so much about soft skills and human interaction and EQ and stuff like that. What role does that play in the selection of candidates? Like, do you utilize those skills more so from a hiring perspective, or like, do you look for those traits in the people that you hire? Or I guess how heavily would you weight that compared to
ideally, right? But I know I worked with a decent number of people who are on the spectrum, autism spectrum in some form or fashion, Aspies and all that kind of stuff. Like by nature, I have like rock bottom levels of empathy. It's only as an adult that I developed that characteristic, I guess you would say, over a long period of time. So all those soft skills are not a requirement, but they're not a requirement to get in. They're not a requirement to do a job. I know a lot of very successful people with just an absence of soft skills. But it is absolutely a requirement to be a effective leader and depending on what you want to do in your career, right? Can you be a developer with zero soft skills? Yes, right? Can you be a CISO with low EQ and low soft skills? No, absolutely not. I mean, it's all about that now, right? So it kind of depends who I'm hiring and where they want to be, right? There are, it's also what you want to aspire to, what you want to do. Like I've had some absolute rock star people that were just plug and chug. Like they don't want promoted. They don't care about money. They want to do this and they want to do that. And the rock stars at that. Okay, you get to choose that. It's not my choice, right? I've also had people that were just okay, but they were just okay. They were okay being okay. And that's what they did. And okay, fine. And then the hard parts is where you have a disparity. The hard part is when you have someone who has like no soft skills and wants to be a leader, and you're like, okay, that's harder because then you've got to confront the disparity between what they want and where they are. And now that's not a problem if they are gritty, coachable, and resilient, because then you go, okay, listen, bro, here's where you need to be in soft skill area. Here's where you are. How do we get there? And if they're like, yeah, 100%, let's figure it out. Cool, I can work with that, right? They're like, no. And you're like, yeah. If your instinct is to argue with me,
and if you go back to the motivator again, if you break down their why they want to be a leader, in some cases, whatever that why is could be applicable to something else. I think a lot of people want to be managers just because they think that's the best way to get more money.
Yeah, I know.
There's so many companies that have these SME technical tracks, be a principal consultant, without needing to lead people. So. Yeah. I think
exactly.
For everybody.
And that applies for a long time. Like that applies for a good solid 15 years in your career, right? If not more, right? And then it does, like, put it this way. There are very, very few individual contributors who are making what a CEO makes, right? If you have C in your title, you're there because you're a leader. You're not there for your technical acumen. But I know a lot of rock star, principal, whatever, that make a crazy amount of money, right? It's not as much as like the executives 2 levels above them, but like it works for a long, long time. And frankly, if you're at that level, then that's a different discussion anyway. But yeah, assume like up to 20 years in your career, you can make every bit as much in an individual contributor technical track kind of role as being a leader every day. In fact, I did exactly that for a long time. I maintained an individual contributor role for a long time and had people that I hired took the leadership track and were at times my boss. In fact, I've had that a couple times in my career where people I hired and trained and mentored became my boss. 100% fine. It's not a problem at all. In fact, one of my buddies, he's a CISO. He was the first guy I hired when I managed an operations center. And he became a CISO a couple of years before me, made more money than I did. And that's fine. I mean, we're friends and now we're CISOs. So like, I've been his boss. He's been my boss. We've been peers. We've done the whole gamut, right? And that's fine. That's great, right? And it works. I mean, you can, and quite honestly, I think that there are a lot of people in cybersecurity in the wrong seat because they were chasing money. And I think that I think that they could be a whole lot happier in a different role, doing what they love, making every bit as much money. Now, tell you about a leader that I had. This was fantastic. In the same meeting, I got, wow, this is awesome what you did to establish culture, and how did you do what you do? This is fantastic. Here's a 15% raise. And we're demoting you. Because you need to be at the right, you're in the wrong seat. You're in the wrong seat. And it was a guy under me, a guy who was on my team. He took my role and I took his role. And everyone's fine with this. All involved are still friends. I talked to the leader guy who demoted me, talked to him yesterday, right? Like it's fine. It's fantastic. And it was all about like, in fact, the raise was dependent on me taking the role in which I could do what I was good at and stop doing the things that I was not nearly as good at, right? So that's a fantastic leader. fantastic leader who made that and nudged me a little bit. Didn't really nudge me, just kind of did it, which works for me. And made that realization known to me that like where you're valuable may not be up the ladder. It may be down the ladder, and that's fine.
That's so interesting. I imagine so many universes in which that could have gone wrong.
We had a beer afterwards. It was great. Like, I mean, put it this way. It took me I processed things pretty quick. I felt a little weird for about 15 minutes. After that, I was like, okay. I was like, so wait a minute. I get 15% more money. All the stuff I hate, I don't have to do anymore. And all the stuff I love, I get to do more of? Okay. Works for me, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes you can get some, and again, I think this kind of goes back to personality types. It's more prevalent for some people versus others. But if a situation were to happen to the wrong person similar to that, they might harbor some resentment, and they might make a stink or whatever it may be, and jealousy kind of ensues. But I think going back to some of your points from earlier, a lot of what makes a good employee in general is an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. If somebody feels that they're in charge of their own destiny and they're responsible when they mess up just as they are when they succeed, that goes a long way towards, I think, staying engaged over the long term.
I'll make another call out here. I dealt with that situation just fine. Okay. What would have been useful for me is if I did not have that within me to process that effectively, is to have a good trusted mentor, right? And not even a cybersecurity, but a good trusted career coach, mentor kind of person to call and be like, I'm all pissed off. And someone to go, slow your roll. So wait a minute, you got a raise, you got praised, they love you, you get to avoid all the crap that you don't like doing, and you get to do more of what you do love doing. Like, tell me the downside here. Right? That's what a good mentor could do. And honestly, that's what I lacked. My dad was rock star in a great many ways. I never got any career coaching from him. I never had a career mentor. I made so many mistakes and figured stuff out the hard way. I hope that my sons will listen to me a little bit, because I can be that voice of reason to help them process some of these things and to teach them, not only, it's not me, but I can teach them the process. And there it goes back to perspective, right? It goes back to like, remember when you were 4 and wiping your butt was a big deal? Like, okay. So let's apply that to your lack of desire to go to wrestling practice, or your lack of desire to do whatever. Or hey, you just got demoted? Huh, okay. Like, let's not get mad and pissed about it. Let's figure out why that happened, be real honest about it, and figure out a plan to either accept it and say, hey, this is a good thing, or fix it and do something different, right? And that perspective that I have as having done this for a while is invaluable, right? I didn't have it, and so I'm eager to do it for other people and my sons, right? I mean, like, that's the built-in thing. But, I have mentees, I have mentors, right? I have people where I can tell you, when I was a brand new CISO 2 years ago, I went and I found that I was saying things that no one else agreed with. And I was like, am I wrong? I might be wrong. I'm pretty sure I think I'm right. I think I have a really good reason why I'm right, and no one argues with my reasoning. They just and I'm like, what the heck? So I found a guy Malcolm Harkins, former CISO of Intel, and I was like, am I wrong? And he's like, no, you're 100% right. Keep on saying it. I'm like, okay. And so I have several mentors that I run stuff, and I'm like, so I'm kind of thinking this, and I'm like, I don't know about that. Or they're like, yeah, 100%. So that allows me to, again, what I'm doing is I'm taking, and this is critical for everyone to do, right? Experience plus expertise equals wisdom. Now, some people learn that wisdom, some people don't. But if someone has some nugget of wisdom, take advantage of it, right? That's why the guy that I taught something to in 20 minutes that took me 9 months, like, that's great. He benefited from my wisdom, right? He benefited from my work. So do that for other people. If other people have learned a lesson, whether it's good or bad, take advantage of it. Like, that's a shortcut, right? And if you go through something that's a terrible experience, you better get value out of it. I mean, if it's going to suck, you may as well get as much value as you can out of it, right? So, yeah, I mean, 100% always take advantage. Have mentors, have mentees. Maybe they're your parents, maybe they're not. It wasn't for me, but, you know, and my dad was great, just not a career coach, right? So mentors and mentees are wonderful, wonderful things to have.
Yeah, so you're almost outsourcing wisdom. I love it.
That's precisely what it is. Like, unabashedly, like with no qualms. Like, oh, you learned something that took you 20 years to learn? I'll take that. That's fine. I mean, that's how it's designed. That's what we should be doing.
How do you go about finding a mentor or a mentee in security these days? What do you think is the best avenue for that?
Oh, asking is one way, right? But it has to be credible. Right, so I mentor. The mentors that I have, it's a little awkward, honestly. It's kind of like kindergarten when you go up and you're like, "Hey, you want to be my friend?" it feels a little awkward. But what I do is I generally will say, "Hey, would you be willing to meet with me for 30 minutes?" And I talk about that, and I kind of try to get an idea for, do we resonate? Do we click? Do we enjoy talking to one another? And if we do, then I say, hey, would it be okay if I set up a recurring meeting for once a quarter on this? And they go, yeah, sure, that's fine. Cool. There you go. I've also done the formal kind of hey, will you mentor me? And it's awkward, but it works. And by the same time, when people come to me, I am very, so what I have a couple of, I've never had anyone do that same approach that I use. I think they should. But it can't be a complete freaking stranger. Like, there needs to be some level of relationship there, and you need to have put in some level of work. Like, hey, I read this. I wanted to get your opinion on X. Okay, sure, that's fine. Now, what I also have is I have people who I'm like, hey, if you have a specific topic, let's talk, right? But I'm not going to meet with you once a week when you're a complete stranger, right? I mean, I don't want to be arrogant. I want to help people, but that's a lot of time commitment, right? So a half hour once a quarter, sure, that's fine, right? And sometimes I've canceled meetings with mentors that I have, and I'm like, hey, I don't have anything. I know that I'm busy. I know that you're busy. So hey, I'll catch you next quarter. That's fine too.
Yeah, I would imagine referrals factor into that as well. I had one guy referred. He wanted to eventually become a CISO, and connected him with a good CISO. And we have the common thread and all-knowing me, so it made it at least a little bit of a warm intro, especially honestly, common ground, I guess.
What can also work a lot is, as though anytime I take time for one-on-one kind of time in session, we all only have so much time, and I have a lot of demands on my time. So what is helpful for me to do also is, if I recognize someone who has a lot that I can learn from, is I will follow them on LinkedIn and click the little bell that I get all of their posts, right? And I'll do that. So before I ask for their one-on-one time, I'll just read every single post that they write and comment or send them DM, right? So I can effectively get their mentorship just by reading everything they write. And that works pretty fantastically well. And that way I'm not imposing on their time, but I'm still able to get so much of their wisdom. LinkedIn really can be a treasure trove of valuable insight.
Totally agree. Yeah, that's why I'm on there all the time. Speaking of time, we're coming up on it, Brent. So is there anything we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
Probably, yeah. I think that people do not value the value of their network enough, right? I think we have a kind of a fundamental mismatch in supply and demand in the industry. I think we have the right jobs and I think we have the right people, but we're not doing a very good job matching them together. And so a great way to get the right matches is via your network. And it's not a matter of like, put in this time and get this output. It's a matter of like, put in this time, put time into LinkedIn, put time into networking, put time into being curious and talking to people. And that places you in the position where good things can happen. And it might be 20 years. It might be 2 months. I don't know. But like the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. That's kind of how your network is, right? It'd be ideal if you've been developing a good network for 20 years. But if you don't, second best time is today. Get started, right? And that involves some level of discomfort and putting yourself out there, but man, is it worthwhile. So I heavily encourage people to lean into LinkedIn. I mentioned Ed Sheeran's first song was terrible earlier. My first posts, not all that great, to be honest. But hey, that's how I get better, right?
Love what you said about putting yourself in the position to be lucky. There's an old saying in pool billiards, and I don't know if it's the same in other sports, but the better I play, the luckier I get. So You're putting yourself in that position because you're playing well, and then things kind of snowball from there, which is the Matthew principle. And I could go on about that all day.
Yeah, but I had a leader tell me one time, he goes, luck is the residue of preparation. I said, well, okay. Then it's going to go just fine because I prepared a lot, right? So, yeah, the work you put in makes a difference.
That's a great place to end. Appreciate your time, Brent. If people want to keep up with what you do, what's the best way to do so?
Oh, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Awesome. Well, we'll put that in the notes. And
all right.
Time, Brent.
Thanks a lot, man. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.